You woke up this morning, walked to your bathroom, and reached for something without thinking. A roll of paper, soft, white, disposable. You used it, threw it away, and moved on with your day. It took less than 30 seconds. You did not think about it once. But here is the thing. That roll of paper is one of the newest inventions in the entire history of human hygiene. For 99% of human existence, it did not exist. And what your ancestors did instead reveals something deeply surprising about how clean, how clever, and how completely practical ancient humans actually were. The modern toilet paper roll was only commercialized in 1857. Joseph Gaiety, an American inventor, began selling what he called therapeutic paper in flat sheets, marketed as a medical product. Perforated rolls on a spool did not appear until the 1890s. This means that every single human civilization that came before, ancient Egypt, ancient Rome, ancient China, medieval Europe, the entire Ottoman Empire, the Aztecs, the Vikings, every society that built cities, wrote laws, created art, and sailed oceans, did all of it without a single sheet of toilet paper. And most of them had systems that were, by any honest measure, far more sophisticated than a cardboard roll in a plastic wrapper. Start at the very beginning. Before cities, before agriculture, before any of the tools or structures you associate with civilization, your ancestors lived as hunter-gatherers for the vast majority of human history. And the archaeological and anthropological evidence suggests they did what almost every other animal on Earth does. They used what was available: leaves, smooth stones, handfuls of dry grass, moss, bark, snow in colder climates, water from rivers and streams. These were not random, desperate choices. Hunter-gatherer groups were intimately familiar with their environments in ways that are almost impossible to imagine from a modern perspective. They knew which leaves were soft and which would irritate. They knew which plants had medicinal properties that could soothe skin. They made deliberate, informed choices about what they used. And they used different materials in different seasons and different landscapes. But the story becomes far more interesting once civilization arrives. Ancient. Rome is perhaps the most well-documented case of pre-modern hygiene. And what the Romans used challenges every assumption you might have about ancient cleanliness. Public bathrooms in Rome were communal, social spaces. Long stone benches with holes cut at regular intervals, positioned over running water channels that carried waste away continuously. Romans would sit side by side, conducting business, having conversations, and yes, using the facilities at the same time. But what they used for cleaning was something called a xylospongium, a sponge attached to a stick, shared between users, rinsed in a channel of running salt water or vinegar between uses. This was not considered disgusting. It was standard civic infrastructure. The sponge on a stick was as normal to a Roman citizen as a flush handle is to you. Now, before you recoil from the idea of a shared sponge, consider what the Romans actually understood. Vinegar is a mild antiseptic. Salt water inhibits bacterial growth. Running water removes particulate matter continuously. The Romans did not have germ theory, but they had something equally powerful. Thousands of years of accumulated practical knowledge about what worked and what did not. They were not naive about hygiene. They were systematic about it in ways that suited their available technology perfectly. Ancient Greece used a different approach. Small ceramic discs, or flat stones called pessoi, a word that later became slang in Greek culture. These smooth, rounded pieces of pottery were used for cleaning and then discarded. Archaeologists have found them in large quantities near ancient Greek latrines. Some of them are inscribed with the names of political enemies, which tells you something interesting about how Greeks combined personal hygiene with a sense of humor about their political rivals. In ancient China, the picture shifts again. China holds a remarkable distinction in the history of hygiene. The first recorded reference to paper being used for hygiene purposes appears in Chinese texts from the 6th century AD, written by a scholar named Yan Jitui, who noted that he would not dare use paper with the names of sages or wise men written on it for such a purpose. This tells you two things. First, paper hygiene was already practiced enough in 6th century China that using written paper was considered disrespectful. And second, the Chinese were using paper for this purpose nearly 1,300 years before Joseph Gayeti commercialized it in America. By the 14th century, the Chinese imperial court was ordering 10 million sheets of paper per year specifically for hygiene use, with particularly fine sheets perfumed and produced for the emperor himself. The Islamic world developed perhaps the most rigorous hygiene tradition of any ancient civilization. Islamic religious law, derived from the Hadith, the recorded sayings and practices of the Prophet Muhammad, established detailed protocols for personal cleanliness that predate modern germ theory by more than 1,000 years. Istinja, the practice of cleaning oneself after using the toilet, was considered a religious obligation. Water was the primary tool. The left hand was designated for cleaning, the right hand for eating, a division that enforced a kind of behavioral hygiene that effectively separated contamination pathways. Stones were permitted as a secondary cleaning tool, but only odd numbers of them, 3, 5, or 7. Never even numbers. This specificity suggests a level of deliberate systematization that goes far beyond accident or improvisation. Medieval Europe is often held up as the low point of human hygiene, and it is true that the collapse of Roman infrastructure, including the remarkable Roman sewer systems and public bathhouses, led to a general decline in sanitation standards across much of the continent. But even here, the picture is more complex than the common caricature. Monks in medieval monasteries used bundles of hay or dried grass, kept in designated areas near the latrines. Wealthy Europeans used wool, lace, or hemp. The poorest populations used their hands, water from streams, or whatever material was locally available. And across virtually all of medieval Europe, there existed a deep cultural understanding that cleanliness was connected to health, even without the scientific framework to explain precisely why. The Vikings, often imagined as unconcerned with cleanliness, were actually meticulous about personal hygiene by the standards of their era. Archaeological finds from Viking settlements consistently include combs, ear cleaners, tweezers, and washing bowls. Norse sagas describe regular bathing as a cultural norm. For hygiene specifically, they used wool, moss, and in coastal communities, dried seaweed. Seaweed is naturally rich in iodine, a compound with genuine antimicrobial properties. Whether the Vikings knew this scientifically is irrelevant. They knew it worked. And then there is water. Across Asia, across the Middle East, across much of Africa and South America, the dominant hygiene tool was not paper at all. It was water, applied directly, using the hand or a small vessel. This tradition has never disappeared. Hundreds of millions of people around the world use water-based hygiene today, often in combination with bidets, handheld sprayers, or small vessels called lotas. From a purely hygienic standpoint, water is objectively more effective at removing biological material than paper. The global dominance of dry paper hygiene is largely a product of Western commercial culture in the 20th century, not of any genuine hygienic superiority. So what does all of this tell you about the people who came before you? It tells you they were paying attention. It tells you they were solving problems with the materials they had, developing systems sophisticated enough to sustain enormous cities, complex legal codes, and flourishing cultures without any of the products lining your bathroom shelf today. They were not primitive. They were resourceful. And in many cases, they were cleaner than the modern world gives them credit for. The next time you reach for that roll without thinking, consider what it replaced. Thousands of years of accumulated human ingenuity. Shared sponges rinsed in vinegar. Smooth ceramic discs inscribed with the names of enemies. Perfumed paper ordered by the million for Chinese emperors. Seaweed on the shores of Viking settlements. A left hand, clean water, and a religious obligation to treat the body with respect. Your bathroom routine is newer than you think, and the people who came before you managed perfectly well without it.